won't catch me going outside on Black Friday for sure. I mean, especially I live in Edmonton. If you go to West Edmonton Mall on Black Friday, you are a special human being that you can deal with that level of busyness. I mean, it is truly shocking. Like it's like the best analogy, I guess. It's like you're in traffic and it's bumper to bumper in the mall. Like literally there's lines to get into stores. I mean, who wants to go through that? But I mean, especially in struggling economic times like this, you know, people will go the extra mile for a deal, because I don't know if you guys have seen this, but when I drive by gas stations, which have lower price than the median, there's cars lined up in the dozens. You guys got any Black Friday plans?
No, I also don't like the mall. Like, generally speaking, there's been a lot of violence at our mall too in Metrotown. Like, somebody got shot there just like a week ago, and some kid got stabbed a couple weeks before that. Not that I think it's like a particularly dangerous place, just it's not great marketing for the mall.
Well, Alex, you're a crime reporter. So
yeah, I should just hang out there all day and wait for an exclusive.
There's always crime.
Yeah, it's funny, Alex. Whenever I drive by a crime scene, which seems to be daily now, which might just be because I'm driving to the ledge every day, so I'm actually driving. But I always think of you. I'm like, Alex needs to get on the scene. I wonder what's going down over there. Because there's actually always crazy stuff going down in Edmonton. I don't know why.
Yeah, I hear that. I've never actually been to Edmonton as an adult. I went there as a kid once, but...
Did you go to the mall?
I think so. I don't remember it.
What about you, Walid? You ever been to West Ed?
No, I haven't, but I heard it's definitely a phenomenal venue. I mean, it's a huge mall, but I've never been. I've actually never been to Edmonton at all.
We were in Calgary recently, and, you know, to the point of crime, I couldn't believe how, like, calm and quiet and not crimey it was.
Yeah, welcome to Alberta. You're not in BC anymore.
No, I mean, like, I've been to a lot of American cities too, and I was just shocked. Like, even American cities have a lot more crime than Calgary. It's really quite a nice place.
Speaking of crime, we will get into that for our first story. My name's Isaac Lamoureux. I'm proud to be joined by my colleagues Alex Zoltan and Walid Tamtam. Let's hop right into things. Yeah, so big crime story this week, Alex, which interests me from a sports perspective, but perhaps you from a crime perspective. What is going on with the Canadian snowboarder and the FBI? I mean, that's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it intrigues me too from a sports perspective. Being a BC boy, I like snowboarding. So this is kind of an interesting story. Like, it should probably be turned into a Hollywood movie one day. There's this guy, his name is Brian Wedding, and he was a giant slalom snowboarder at the 2002 Salt Lake City Olympics. He made the FBI's top 10 list back in March. He's considered to be one of the larger cocaine kingpins in the world, according to Pam Bondi and by many other sources as well. The big news this week was that 7 Canadians are being extradited to the United States in connection with his cocaine enterprise, which Sam Cooper reported on as well through our partners over at Juno News. It's really, really a crazy story in the sense of how many people are being extradited and how they're being taken from different parts of the country as well. So there's a fella in Montreal, there's 2 arrests in Alberta and several in Ontario too. So yeah, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, Alex, is there any information on kind of what led to this guy's downfall from an Olympic snowboarder? And I know, to be fair, most people, you're in the Olympics, you don't really make money per se, but still from that level of notoriety, let's say, to now a drug lord.
Yeah, so the story goes that he went down to Mexico and apparently he met some women. Apparently he's a bit of a ladies' man. And so he met some women who had some connections with the Mexican cartel, and that's how he established some of his connections. He also has connections to some of the major, according to the FBI, some of the major trucking and logistics people in Canada. We all know who is involved heavily in that industry. So yeah, it's just really, really crazy. It reminds me of that movie Blow. Have you ever seen that one with Johnny Depp?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Yeah, I don't know. It's like behind every great man is a great woman, but I think behind every bad man is a bad woman too. I think he got kind of corrupted by some some chicas down in Mexico.
When spring break goes awry.
Yeah, but it's they increased the reward from $10 million to $15 million for his capture. So
he's a wanted fugitive, and if you were to apprehend him and bring him in, you would be rewarded $15 million.
Yeah, you might also get shot, though. I mean, that's how this whole thing happened, right? Is that there was a federal witness who was prepared to testify against him in Colombia, and this is what these 7 Canadians, including a very notorious criminal defense lawyer in Toronto, they apparently are involved in a conspiracy to commit murder, allegedly. And so they murked this guy in Colombia who was set to testify against Wedding.
Yeah, that's crazy. I mean, we all, many of us know how dangerous the cartels are. It's definitely not something you want to get involved in, right?
Yeah, if anybody has any information on his whereabouts, my DMs are open, but no, I'm just kidding.
You gotta split the 15 million with Alex. So once Alex gets his 7.5 million from his cut, he will be able to get a better webcam, ladies and gentlemen. I mean,
yeah, that's right. I can upgrade my equipment finally and stop recording on this potato phone. But one of the guys that got is being extradited. He actually ran his own little crime blog called The Dirty News. So that's really interesting as well. So
the Dirty News, what kind of crime was that?
Yeah, so the Dirty News is they had an Instagram handle. They also have an X account. They were reporting. They actually posted a picture of the victim in Colombia. As the indictment goes, they were paid $10,000 through a proxy, but ultimately from Wedding, to not post about Wedding, but instead to post about this alleged snitch. And then, But I mean, that doesn't necessarily mean that they conspired to kill the person or whatever. It's still, people are innocent until proven guilty. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, that's the thing. None of these allegations have been proven, right? So They are just wanted, but not necessarily criminals. But
the snowboarding element is super interesting. Funnily enough, this is a bit of a, bit of a story. How would you say this? Inside baseball. But when I was writing that story about Wedding back in March, at that time, our editor was Andrew Lawton, and I had put in a few too many snowboarding puns in the story, and he said he appreciated the puns, but this guy's also a murderer, so he's like, when you're dealing with murder, you should probably err on the side of caution in terms of using humor in your newswire articles.
That's the trick with sports writing, Alex. The puns are just it's basically like playing t-ball. They're so easy, right? They're just all sitting there, low-hanging fruit.
Yeah, I remember I said something like he slid into the top 10, and what else? What there was another one where I was like, he's on a different kind of run now. And it was just chock full of always
going downhill very fast.
Yeah, exactly. So we have to err on the side of caution and be sensitive about these things because he is involved in some serious stuff allegedly. So
yeah, $15 million bounty on your head. It's no laughing matter. Speaking of money, for our next story, this is kind of interesting, and I'll talk to you about it, Walid. So the Privy Council clerk sold his Brookfield shares to avoid personal conflict issues, but of course, this is what many Canadians have been calling on Prime Minister Mark Carney to do since before he even got elected, since the Liberal leadership race, to be frank. And of course he hasn't, and he's used many excuses like, oh, it's in a blind trust, as if he doesn't know that what the shares were when they went in. But yeah, what was going on here, Walid?
Yeah, so on Wednesday there was an ethics committee hearing where he was testifying. Of course, this hearing only came about thanks to a vote earlier this fall, when the House of Commons had a vote sponsored by Conservative MP Michael Barrett to look into the holdings and stock dealings of Mark Carney. Now, of course, with the Privy Council, Michael Sabia, he himself talked about how he decided to sell his shares of Brookfield because he was an administrator, and he thought that it was a more simple and practical move instead of other alternatives like reinvesting or at the very least dealing with the perception of a conflict of interest. I think he was very careful with his language during the committee hearing not to indict Mark Carney with any sort of bad dealings because, of course, the steps that he takes may have been, like you said, Isaac, the expectations that Canadians have had Now, if Michael Sabia is doing it, why isn't Mark Carney doing it? And of course, that's kind of how Sabia is trying to separate himself from the prime minister and give himself a very different kind of viewpoint. I mean, he's maintained that his decision was primarily a matter of practical optics and public view rather than legal obligation. So he actually denied that there's a question of conflict of interest as to why he even divested from Brookfield in the first place. So ultimately, I really think that this is a story that brings us closer to a very important point of understanding that, you have legitimacy behind the narrative of conflict of interest, of, Carney having a load of investment in the United States, a load of investment in specific industries. I mean, take us back to the April election, guys. You guys, I don't know if you watched all the debates, but I remember very specifically during the French leadership debate, I think it was only about a week before the election, actually. It was in April, I'm pretty sure. Mark Carney praised the Westinghouse Electric Company as a viable nuclear option. Now, now he's, of course, talking about nuclear energy, talking about clean energy. That was the topic, but he mentioned that company by name. And that company is actually owned by Brookfield. Of course, Brookfield and its public image is under more and more scrutiny thanks to the prime minister's role, former role rather. Even last month there was a committee, or actually it was earlier this month, there was a committee hearing about offshore tax havens, and the chief economist of the Canadian Labour Congress, D.T. Cochrane, accused Brookfield, and we know this already, looking into the stories, of being a major tax cheater or a world class or master class of tax avoidance of a company. So Brookfield's record on taxes, its investments in other countries, that by the way includes the UAE. Brookfield has invested in oil projects in the UAE. Of course, Mark Carney just departed the UAE yesterday off to South Africa for the G20 meeting, but his dealings in the UAE could definitely be completely embedded with Brookfield aligned business interests. So again, I think whether it's the electric company he's talking about on a debate stage and giving free advertisements on a national platform, or if it's the tax record that his company has now that he's involved in this policy with the government that he's in charge of, there's a lot of room for conflict of interest, and it goes far beyond just the stock investments. It goes into the decision making, it goes into connections, it goes into the geopolitics of how he deals with oil domestically versus in certain countries and certain marketplaces. So, I mean, this story is only one more article in a larger file of stories that we will continue to see in the coming weeks and months as opposition MPs from not only the Conservatives, but even the Bloc Québécois, and perhaps even the NDP that can step up and give a fair look at the company and his dealings, and the fact that he hasn't really revealed his assets and essentially hasn't cut full ties with his former company.
Can I add something, not only to what Walid just said, but also to the last story, because this was a talking point that I really wanted to make this morning. I think that one of the most, and I posted about this morning, one of the most revealing and exposing things about the entire convoy saga is that when it comes to tax evasion, when it comes to money laundering, when it comes to crime, it's very, very clear the RCMP and the federal government has all the resources it needs to investigate conflicts of interest, to freeze people's bank accounts, to prosecute people, but there's just no political will. It seems like the only time the federal government ever wants to crack down on its citizens is when they're criticizing them. And I find that really, really outrageous. I mean, I think that's the thing that really upsets me about this wedding story, and also about all of these conflicts of interest that the Walid is exposing as well.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, Alex. Well, in my neck of the woods, that is relevant because, of course, Alberta just yesterday passed the Peterson Law, Bill 13, which will essentially prohibit professional regulators from firing their employees or punishing them in any way for personal beliefs they held and expressed outside of the workplace. But why that's relevant is because Smith made a similar point in the press conference when reporters were trying to press her and say, "Oh, what if people are criticizing your government or whatever?" And she said, "Look, it's very simple. As it is right now, look around in Alberta, look at the unions, look at these employees. They're all criticizing us. They don't care. They're not afraid to do it. They are not punished for doing so. And then she gave a list of examples of people trying to support her government, support their bills, and the punishments that they went through from these unions because they're not allowed to do that. So in Alberta, it was actually the opposite case where she's like, look, Smith said, look, what are you talking about? Like the people criticizing us have a fair open field to do so. It's actually people supporting our government that need protections.
Well, also in your neck of the woods in Alberta, one of the individuals that was in the indictment, his name is Alistair Chapman. He's a former junior A hockey player. He played for the Drayton Valley Thunder, strangely enough. He ended up being, he was charged with cocaine trafficking, I believe, back in 2018, and his charges were dropped on the Jordan rule because the prosecutors could not get him to trial fast enough. He spent too much time in pretrial custody. Having covered the Coots case, I find that completely outrageous. They spent millions of dollars and it spared no expense to prosecute those guys who were engaged in, I would say, mostly peaceful protests. I still don't recommend bringing a gun to anywhere near a protest. But then again, in Alberta, everybody has guns, so it's a bit of an exception to the rule throughout the rest of Canada. But this is exactly what I mean, right? And then another guy in Montreal was also arrested, and his charges were dropped on a Section 8 charter violation. They said that they broke his right to be free from unwarranted search and seizure. He was a big crack dealer in Montreal. So it's just interesting to see like what the government puts their money behind and their energy behind in terms of persecuting or prosecuting Canadians.
And going back to the clerk quickly, Walid, I wanted to ask, you said he was very careful with his language when speaking as to not indict Mark Carney, but was he questioned specifically about Carney? Because I did see something in your article about him saying, surprise to me, that despite him being the administrator of Carney's review there, he didn't actually know what was in the portfolio, which I don't know how that could be. But yeah, was he questioned directly about Carney?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it was a long session, and he's testified primarily on matters to do with Carney more than himself, frankly, because I think more Canadians are concerned with the dealings of the Prime Minister than the Privy Council that is basically appointed to protect the Prime Minister, as he said himself. So I guess your question is referring to was he questioned about Carney's business dealings, where he actually has interest?
Yeah, no, we can even, I think you answered it fine already. We can even shift. It's like, is there any hope for Canadians that Carney will be held accountable for these conflicts of interest? For example, if he makes billions of dollars through investing taxpayer dollars to help, let's say, his private dealings, things of that nature. Do you think there's any chance he could ever be held accountable in any way?
I think the best accountability measure that we have today, and I'm saying this after spending 10 years under the Liberal government, seeing everything from SNC-Lavalin to the weed charity scandal, the biggest consequences that have happened out of those situations are loss of a few MPs, loss of some seats in the 2019 and 2021 elections. So I guess the best form of accountability is for Canadians to take that into account, even Canadians who are of the progressive or left-leaning inclinations, and be critical about these kinds of business dealings, because whether you're from one side or the other on the ideological spectrum, this is about the kind of an ethical behavior that can be replicated in the future by any kind of government, regardless of their leanings. I mean, I think Conservatives and Liberals are equally capable of having a life in the private sector and having interests in the private sector. I think Carney is incredibly invested in that sector because, of course, he's had major roles, major portfolios. Obviously, this is a major sovereign wealth fund in the case of Brookfield, but also his past positions even before then. So I think really it's the ballot box that will be able to generate the most accountability, because I think every other measure from committees to House of Commons votes and everything else have always been barred by the politically established dominant force of the Liberal Party and its puppetry ally in the case of the NDP, in some cases the Bloc, other cases, the fact of the matter is they just have not seen full accountability for their track record of 10 years of major scandals involving tax dollars, involving conflicts of interest, involving interference in areas that are not meant to be political, but rather institutional and impartial. So I think in the case of Mark Carney, he's found himself in a situation where, yes, he will receive scrutiny, but that will not account to any true accountability until an election of some sort is held, or until some sort of political consequence, adheres to the public's interests and sees him take a loss in a general election, or at the very least takes them to a very different position than he is today. But for today, I think he's still comfortably protected by his team.
And speaking of scrutiny, Walid, Canada's immigration regime is under scrutiny by a common, perhaps more common than some would imagine these days, because J.D. Vance is always getting involved, it seems, in Canadian politics. Most recently, of course, he was all over the church burnings file, trying to support Christians in Canada. And while our politicians weren't very interested in doing that, but he stood up for them. But now he's saying that Canada's embrace of diversity and mass immigration is what is causing their economy, our economy, to stagnate. And he was all over attacking leftist ideology as root causes. Walid, what was he saying?
Yeah, so basically the thread of the tweet that we saw, it started off with a graph showing the stagnation of the UK, Canada, and even partially the US, much less the case, of the quality of living standards. And I think you can kind of tell the graph covers a lot of the COVID period and the post-COVID period, and you kind of see how the US eventually kind of escaped that situation, while the UK and Canada being the worst, have very, very slow growth or even decline of the quality of living standards. So he highlighted that Canada has this diversity regime and narrative, of which most people in some of the key areas like Toronto, we covered this recently with the story of Mark Carney celebrating how Toronto is a majority immigrant population or a majority foreign-born immigrant population. And ultimately, you have J.D. Vance, the vice president, who spends a lot of time on social media criticizing different ideas, having these ideological public policy discussions without any concern for frontier or diplomacy. Because I actually kind of appreciate that, because I wish other leaders of other countries could do that more often. But frankly, Vance looked at Canada on the graph and specifically mentioned how this situation is not because of Trump or tariffs or any foreign boogeyman. It's about Canada's own leadership and decisions, specifically referring to Canada's regime and its endorsement of its diversity mass migration policy that we've had over a long period of time, where you have more people coming in than what our services and economy can actually support, and therefore more people taking smaller and smaller pieces of the pie. You have this situation where Canadians are falling behind. I can give you a few examples that I've been very concerned about myself as a young person, and as I've been covering as a journalist, is the question of jobs for youth. The record high youth unemployment in the last 30 years is happening as we speak right now, even as youth are doing more and more education, taking more and more opportunities to inform and engage themselves in their communities. They find it hard to come by basic jobs like working at Tim Hortons, for example, where those restaurants are taking foreign workers, literally taking foreign workers by the thousands into the country, giving them visas, giving them sponsorship to cover these jobs that high school graduates or high school students frankly could be covering from as young as age 14, frankly, according to our laws in Ontario. So it's definitely very much the truth that we have a lot of responsibility here at home for why things are going the way they are, unfortunately. Of course, the tariff situation isn't helping, you could say, as well, from the counter argument, but I definitely think it's been more of a distraction than it's been an actual focal point of how we can take on the quality of living in Canada. I mean, I don't disagree with Mark Carney when he says we can give to ourselves more than anyone can take away from us. And he's referring to specifically changing the dynamic of interprovincial trade, changing the dynamic about our economic trade around the world and our domestic production and oil and energy. I mean, this is all good, but for now, I don't think Mark Carney's really delivered on that message enough. And a lot of his supporters and his loyalists, people that are defending him, day after day after day, almost now, I guess 8 months of Carney we've had, right? So those kinds of people are really much turning their eyes more and too much to Washington, too little to Ottawa.
Yeah, Alex, do you think not just Vance, but people of that nature speaking out against Canada's flaws and showing the data, you want to blame Trump? I mean, look at the graph. How is that possible? That's just not what the numbers support. Do you think it has any effect, I guess, on just general Canadian populace and how they think about the issue?
Well, on a surface level, I find this story kind of hilarious because it reminds me of when, like, your ex sends you a text and it's like, stop obsessing over me. And it's like, what? You texted me. We weren't even talking about you. Like, what's going on here? Like, there's a little bit of admission by projection there. I actually agree with most of the spirit of what he said, but I don't necessarily agree that Canada is alone in this. I will call it a bad habit of blaming Americans for Canada's problems. Americans do the same thing. I mean, we just spent the better part of a year of Donald Trump blaming Canada for the U.S. opioid crisis, despite the fact that there's no evidence to support that at all. There hasn't been a single substantive seizure of southbound fentanyl going into the United States, despite Trump's claims that it's pouring over the border and killing hundreds of thousands of Americans. So I'm sorry, like, I'm not saying, I don't want to fall into the trap of this binary thinking where if I say U.S. bad, I mean Canada good. I think that both governments are actually doing a pretty terrible job all around right now. And yeah, I just find it it's kind of ironic, right? Like, you guys are obsessing with us, but you're talking about us. Like, you called me, I didn't call you.
That's a fair point. I suspect that Vance himself is someone that reads comments, that engages with social media influencers and political commentators. Again, it's not very much the ethic of a vice president, but like I said earlier, he is active on social media. He is quite active on X, on all kinds of topics, all kinds of issues, and probably unnecessarily so. So definitely, like you mentioned, that whole metaphor in the X situation is, who the hell mentioned Canada out loud until he did, right? And I definitely think that the tactic, and this, by the way, is nothing unique to the Trump admin right now. It's a tactic of any government under scrutiny to create a boogeyman, or specifically a boogeyman that is across an internationally recognized border, which means that they cannot control the situation, but they can blame and pin the situation's responsibility on that entity, on that government, a foreign government in this case. And that essentially delegates responsibility away from them, outside of the realm of their own influence and their own control, which then means the frustration that generated from that issue can no longer be attributed to them. And I think it's probably the sign of the weakest regimes in the world. I mean, whether you're looking at a country like Iran or a country like Venezuela, or
India and Pakistan do that all the time, right? Anytime.
Yeah, it's a very, very helpful political trick, because sometimes, maybe not in the case of J.D. Vance in the U.S., but typically in your mentioning countries, you can galvanize your own nationalism at home and double down on your own credibility while crapping on an enemy or a rival, you could say in this case, without any consequence to your own record.
Walid, you're saying basically the U.S. is using the Liberals' own tricks against them, because that is the single-handed reason how the Liberals won the election, by painting Trump as the boogeyman, even though...
Well, he painted himself as the boogeyman. I mean, he joked repeatedly about annexing Canada and turning it into a 51st state. That was exactly the kook bait that the CBC and the Liberal Party needed to get reelected.
Sure. I think with Trump specifically, I think he used multiple countries and multiple relationships, both with Europe, specifically a long time with Europe, the EU entirely, and NATO, along with Canada and a number of other countries, as kind of, we're all just exploiting the US for our benefit. I mean, the fact of the matter is, look, there is room to change the trade relationship, and the US has a lot of leverage on their end. The kind of, charting the auto sector to bring jobs back. I mean, heck, it's working to some favor. Is it only temporary? Perhaps so. So I think definitely Trump has already done that before, but in the case of reaping the political benefit, I think the Canadian side is reaping the benefit more. I mean, I don't think Trump won the election just because he hated on Mexico. I think there's a lot of more domestic policy at play there. I think the Canadian Liberals completely resurrected themselves from third or fourth place to first, and even now borderline majority territory if election was held today, because of that situation. So Liberal HQ is evil but clever, you could say, for conservatives to look at. I'm not
clever, but also timing really worked out in their favor because of the tariff situation and everything. I mean, there was a lot of timing involved. I guess there always is.
And I think that, like, as well, in forgiveness to J.D. Vance, I think that the spirit, again, of his tweet is mostly accurate. I think that it doesn't tell the full picture, though, because it's GDP per person relative to inflation. So the immigration issue is a huge component of the reason why things are going so poorly in Canada, specifically when it comes to things like the cost of living crisis, because if you have more people, you have more demand, the prices go up. But the other part of that component is that our government, much like their government during COVID, spent an enormous amount of money. And that's really the main driver of inflation, right, is the money printing. And so, I don't know. I would say that it's mostly accurate, but somewhat misleading and not entirely, doesn't capture the whole picture of what's going on.
Yeah, it's hard to capture the whole picture with one graph, but I mean, it tells the story well enough. As for our next story, Waleed, this again, definitely related to you because it's funny. I was watching the video, which we'll start with soon, and I was like, I was pretty sure Waleed. I seen Waleed filming like right there because it looked like the more or less the same environment in the backgrounds in the videos that you had. But yeah, can we just run that video right away? Yeah, so basically, the climate conference, which is wildfire related, and they're trying to bring them down, lit on fire. I mean, this is absolute pandemonium. Yeah, what was going on here, Waleed? This is great. It seems like a crazy irony or hypocrisy, or just, I don't know the proper word, but this is crazy. Yeah.
I think it's metaphorical, frankly. But first of all, I want to start off by saying that I'm glad that no one was seriously injured. I heard from
Yeah.
the team that were giving me updates, the media team on the ground, as a member of the press accredited by the UN and of course by the Brazilian government as well. I received regular updates about the closure, about the emergency dispatch team, and everything else. So for now, I heard only of a few instances of people, inhaling some smoke from the fire, who were probably in close proximity to the fire and the flames, and so they were probably getting some treatment on site. But no serious injuries or burns.
Yeah, rest assured, guys, I wouldn't have been laughing if there were serious injuries. I knew that there wasn't. So
Yeah, no, absolutely. Nothing that anyone here of any wrongdoing. I think we're all well informed of the situation right now. But just in hindsight, like thinking about the environment I was going through in Belém when I was at the COP conference, you have to remember this is not inside the Amazon rainforest, but on the border of the rainforest in the Amazonian region. It's an indoor event, regardless if you have the scene of the forest or not. Like the most of the day, all the delegates, all the visitors, all the press are spending time indoors in an environment which I criticized for not even having proper air conditioning. I mean, for the first couple of days, we didn't even have AC in 75% of the entire venue. And I knew that because I was sweating my behind off all day. I had to wear nothing more than a polo shirt until after the COP30 event. I started on the 10th and 11th and 12th, so I had to start putting on some suits to try to really beef up my game and hopefully flirt with Stephen Gilbo and other Canadian delegates available there. So you had this backdrop of a very warm environment because it's in the north side of Brazil in a very small, probably moderate city, which probably can't even take on this kind of international event in the first place. Hence why the president and the government hired 3 cruise ships to dock and burn 135 liters of diesel fuel per hour to house more delegates from abroad in these very fancy hotels on board these ships. Then you had this air conditioning situation. You have warm weather every day, probably 35 degrees right now as we speak over there, 36 degrees, again, with lack of proper air conditioning. So it gives you this backdrop that I'm thinking to myself, like, maybe they're doing this on purpose. Excuse my language. Maybe they're doing this stuff on purpose. Maybe they're trying to really give us this environment where, we're sweating our behinds off and like we're just thinking about, how imminent the global warming crisis is and how that 1.5% might actually be a irreversible damage and will burn the whole world to the ground. So I guess before that happens, the COP30 event was almost burned to the ground itself. So I feel like there's a bit of a hidden message there that, I think really, guys, is that environment was just super, if you think about it, was just a super flammable environment. Everything was compostable. Everything was made out of paper. The forks, the spoons, the straws, the warm weather, lack of air conditioning, a lot of actually another story to tie into this is the bathrooms didn't even have running water the first week and a half. The bathrooms
what?
inside did not have running water. You had
So
toilets with no water. You had basically as it would be as
Like an outhouse, right?
no, not even that. No. This is like if I went into Home Depot in the section of models of toilets and just took a dump there. Like no water. Fellas, the
what's
same
so
thing.
funny, Willie, what's so funny to me about that is I don't know if you remember, well, I'm sure you do. Last week we were talking about this, and I described this whole COP30 conference as the globalist version of Woodstock 99. And like the only thing that it was missing was fire. And then we got it.
Yeah, Willie, do they have any idea how the fire started? Because I know it's a flammable environment, but you still need like an ignition source to start the fire. So how did it happen? Do we know?
Climate change. No, I'm just kidding.
Fires are just start combusting everywhere. Oh my!
And this is the thing. See, this is the narrative that we have to get to the bottom to on this story, because this is what happened in Canada effectively. Remember the 2023 forest fires we're having, and then oh, this is happening because the world is
It was all man-made.
Man,
Yeah,
I mean,
man
where's the
caused
arsonists?
fires.
Who did this? Like, who was the person that put a fork in the microwave, or the person that just left something unattended, or person that
It was probably Catherine McKenna.
Oh yeah, the paper forks, man. Of course, I was like, wait, paper. You can put a fork in the microwave, but then they're paper, so yeah, I mean, microwaves. There you go.
I'm just look, Isaac. I'm someone that looks with a lot of not in terms of the events agenda, but in terms of the logistics. Like having COP30 in Brazil, like having something themed around the Amazon rainforest. For me, like I can get behind that personally. Like I think it is a noteworthy goal to protect nature, to keep water.
Didn't they
clean.
chop down a bunch of the rainforest for the conference? I mean, come on.
13 kilometers to be exact.
Yeah.
13 kilometers are protected Amazon, protected by the own government that had decided to chop it down. So again, it really rings a lot of hypocrisy there. So this event has marred the credibility of the Brazilian government, of the entire COP agenda, the entire UN, and its efforts to try to combat whatever, because at the end of the day, they've contributed a lot to it with this event alone. And just from the logistics end, like, in Canada, when we host the Olympics or the World Cup next year, for example, Alex and I will be covering World Cup related content for True North in the next coming months. I care how well it's run. I care that public safety is in check, that hotel accommodations are well managed for the influx of people coming up from abroad. In Canada's my country. I love Canada to be well represented on the world stage, and specifically when people are coming to Canada to visit. And looking at it from the Brazilian angle, having many friends over here, having many colleagues in the media that are here in Brazil, they've all, from left and right, they've all come to the conclusion that this event has put Brazil under a bad light. It's shown Brazil to be a country that cannot handle this kind of event, or at least the city of Belém incapable. And I think that's definitely a fair assessment to make. Is no running water in the bathrooms. Food is expensive and limited, and most of it isn't even Brazilian. They were selling croissants. For $10 each, Canadian dollars. That is exactly. I mean, I didn't even have the guts to expensify this to the boss, because I'm like, what the hell? I was just starving in there, and there's not a lot of food options outside nearby, and I had to be there on the ground to catch all these people, from hour to hour and minute to minute. You had this, lack of air conditioning, super hot and warm environment. It was all indoors. All these pavilions have been, built up, all wood, all paper, all. So it was the optimal environment for a disaster, frankly, and thankfully the fire was contained quickly.
Yeah, I'm just glad you're okay, Waleed. When I saw it come on my X feed, I felt like calling. He'd be like, "Waleed, get out of there! There's a fire." So
I see it, man. I see it.
You saw like 20 minutes later. I'm like, I'm all good. I'm on the outside now. I'm like, oh my god, that would be.
As for the actual event, Waleed, will it have to be extended because it got stalled, or what's going on with the timeline?
Well, apparently they opened up the event area where the fire happened. Pretty much all the event area back at 8:48 p.m. local time. This fire happened around 2:30 local time, so it took about 6 hours out of the event. But even from the days prior, they've been extending the negotiation hours and extending the venue opening hours longer into almost midnight, because delegates have required more time to engage and to dish out taxpayer dollar for God knows what, from every respective country involved in this whole fiasco. So I think they might be fine with the time. I don't think they're going to have to add a whole day, but if they do, I'll let you know, because again, today is supposed to be the last day, so we'll know if there will be anything happening after. But again, I think that for the main venue, for the main events, main speeches, world leaders, delegates, ministers, I think they're all starting to head home now, unless they're trying to tour the rest of the country and have a little fun trip to Rio on the taxpayer dime. I think I can suspect a few officials doing that for sure.
Yeah, well, speaking of heading home, that wraps up this week's show. It's been a pleasure, but remember, everything you heard today was off the record.
It's a good wrap.
Except
in weather, because it's like winter here, and I'm like, oh. But then if you don't have running water, it's like, ooh, I'd rather be in minus.
Warm today, actually. I'm in Sao Paulo. It's like 30 degrees. I'm looking at my MacBook. 30 degrees Celsius today.
It's nice.
30 degrees. Yeah, it's nice here too. It's 2 degrees, and I keep waiting for it to get cold and snow, but it doesn't, and it's annoying.
Ottawa's been vintage. I don't know if you guys watch soccer, but like there was like the Premier League final, and it was happening in Ottawa. I think on November 4th on Sunday or Monday, and there was like a blizzard there, and they were playing like soccer. Like they had to get these leaf blowers just to blow out.
Oh yeah, the game in Ottawa or whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah, it was hilarious. You couldn't see the ball.
You couldn't even
You're
see
saying-
the outline, the touch line. You could not know if the
There was
ball
that
gonna
much
get
snow,
up.
eh?
Yeah.
Ah,
Yeah, you
Wow.
can tell that like soccer is not meant to be played in the snow because the ball is white.
Yeah, no, that's like the Grey Cup. Like it's always, or it's often in the snow because of when it is held. But it wasn't this year. But at least you can like the ball's in the air. You can see it just fine, right? But soccer, yeah, that's tough. Because I remember when they played in Edmonton like 2 years ago, it was freezing, and I mean, same kind of issues, right? They need outdoor indoor stadiums. Like what do you call them? The stadiums that can close, like baseball has that.
the domes.
Yeah, the domes. Yeah.
Do you guys know why American football was invented? It's actually a really interesting thing. Yeah.
Yeah, I should know. I feel like I've heard it before, but
So it was during a time between the American Civil War and the First World War and after the American Indian Wars. So there was all this concern at the Ivy League universities that men were becoming too effeminate because there weren't enough wars. So they wanted to create a game that simulated the trench warfare they saw during the American Civil War where men fought to the death for inches.
Wow.
Wow.
I'll take your word for it. We need something like that in the 21st or in the 21st century here, because men getting too effeminate is an issue, I guess, as old as time.
Well, and in the first few years, they didn't wear helmets and people did die.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even still, Alex, the brain damage these guys have. I mean, you've seen the movies and the data. It's terrible. Like their average rate of mortality is like 20 years younger or something than a normal man. It is very, very sad when you think about it, because
And you can't really remove that from the game once you realize why it was invented, right? Like the raison d'etre of football is to make men tough by putting them in a warlike environment.
Yeah, no, it's funny you mentioned that, actually, because when we were watching the Grey Cup, this one Alouettes player was wearing this crazy thing on his head, and it looked like a beanie. And my mom just kept complaining about it, so I looked it up, and eventually I was like, yeah, it's probably to protect his head. I'm guessing he had a concussion. That's exactly what it was. Like it's something you put on top of your helmet that looks like a beanie, essentially, that protects your head further. So, there are ways, but you're right, Alex. It's about being a man, so you're not going to add these soft things into the sport, but you will pay the consequences and die at 60 years old. So,
You know what I've always wondered about helmets? Why aren't you required to wear a helmet when you're driving a car?
well, would that really help you? Like, does the airbag not accomplish that goal?
Well, I assume it does, but like, what happens if the airbag doesn't deploy, or I think you could.
Airbag.
Airbags generally, I'd say, deploy.
There's got to be some kind of science behind it, but like in this era of the nanny state, it's just like one of these weird random things I think about sometimes. Like,
Alex, I already see people driving in their cars alone with masks on, and it just makes me sick. Last thing we need is people driving alone with freaking helmets on, man.
this is real. So during COVID, I was walking through a parking lot and I looked into somebody's car. I don't know why I did it, but they had the COVID masks over the air filter thing. They had stretched the COVID masks, like, I guess in case
that can't
like,
be safe practice. That cannot be safe practice.
Dude, it was bizarre. I was like, do they think that like the COVID is going to come in through the air vent in their car?
Yeah, the vaccine can't protect you from contracting COVID, but putting a mask over your air filter in your car, now that's how you avoid it.
Yeah, crazy times, man. It was like mass formation psychosis or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's insane.
It's hard to believe that we lived through that.
No, man, like I'm just picturing that now. It's insane. Like
oh yeah, like we all took pictures of it. I ran into my work and I was like, guys, you got to come out and see this, and like, we're having like a big laugh over it.
That's crazy. It's your boss, and he's like, "You're fired."
No, we were all pretty fed up with it already at that point.